I now call to order the Monroe County Board of Zoning Appeals meeting for September 1st, 2021. You want to do the roll call, Larry?
Margaret Clemens.
Here.
Bertie Garitas.
Here.
Skip Daly.
Present.
Mary Beth Smarchek.
Here.
Vicky Sorensen.
Here.
We have all 5 members in a quorum.
Okay. Want to introduce the evidence, Larry?
I request that the following items be introduced in evidence for tonight's meeting. Monroe County zoning ordinance adopted and amended, Monroe County subdivision ordinance as adopted and amended, the rules of procedure of the Board of Zoning Appeals of Monroe County. The case is advertised and docketed for hearing on tonight's agenda.
I move
the agenda.
I second that.
I will call the roll on approval of the agenda. Margaret Clemens.
Yes.
Bertie Garitas.
Yes.
Skip Daly.
Yay.
Mary Beth Smarchek.
Yes.
Vicky Sorensen.
Yes.
I guess we need to do a roll on approval of the evidence. Is that correct?
I thought we just did that.
Okay.
Approval of the agenda. Yes.
Okay. The last roll was on approval of the evidence.
I move that we approve that tonight's agenda is advertised.
Okay, I'll call the roll. Is there a second?
Second.
Call the roll. Bertie Garitas.
Yes.
Skip Daly.
Yay.
Mary Beth Smarchek.
Yes.
Vicky Sorensen.
Yes.
Margaret Clemens.
Yes.
Okay. I move that we approve the minutes of the April 7th, 2021 meeting as they are written.
Second.
I will call the roll on approval of the April 7th BZA minutes. Skip Daly.
Abstention.
Okay. Mary Beth Smarchek.
Yes.
Vicky Sorensen.
Yes.
Margaret Clemens.
I need to abstain. I wasn't at the meeting.
Okay. Bertie Garitas.
Yes.
Okay, we have 3 yeses and 2 abstentions, so the minutes are approved.
Okay, and there's no administrative business and no old business. First up on new business we have tonight, case numbers VAR-21-35A, VAR-21-35B, VAR-21-35C. And who's got this one? Rebecca, are you here?
I am here. Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, fantastic. Jackie's not here tonight to run tech presentations for us, so I'm going to give it a shot on my end. So give me a second here to queue up the presentation. Okay. So can you all see my screen at this point?
Yes.
Okay, great. So let me advance here. Okay, so here we are. This is a petition that has 3 pieces to it for property at 111 South Kimball Drive. It is Redeemer Community Church of Bloomington. And it's contains 0.86 acres and is currently zoned RS 3.5. And the comp plan has this designated as Makua Mixed Residential. So the 3 variance requests that are being asked for is an aisle width variance to Chapter 806, a landscape buffer yard variance request to Chapter 830, and a landscape parking island variance request to chapter 830 as well. The petitioner in this case is requesting these variances because they would like to expand parking area there on their lot. They have an existing paved parking lot, but they want to add more parking spaces and are wanting to utilize some space on their parcels to the north. And this is actually a pre-existing non-conforming lot. So in order for the petitioner to further develop or build out on this lot, they will need to get these variances approved before they can do that. And I do want to note that these variance requests are really only pertaining to the existing site. The new parking area, if these variances are approved, will meet all other design standards required in the zoning ordinance. So what the lot currently has, I'll take these in pieces here. So regarding the landscape parking island variance request, the ordinance requires 3,812 square feet. And the site at the moment has 1,134 square feet. So they are currently not meeting some of the parking island standards. So therefore they are seeking a variance. The second piece is the landscape buffer yard. In this situation, the required buffer yard is determined based on the fact that it sits between a church, which is considered high intensity, and a single family residence, which requires a certain D value, in this case, 420 D every 100 feet. So as it stands at the moment, the petitioner is 82 D short of the requirements, which equates to roughly 13 shrubs. And finally, the aisle width component, they are seeking a variance to aisle width requirements. We would normally require a 20-foot width, but the existing width is 12 feet. And I will note that the aisle width in this case, again, remember this is pre-existing, it does actually have some constraints already in place, including some existing buildings. So I can touch on that here in just a moment. So in the upper left corner is the petitioner's site, well, the site conditions. There are no issues with slope out here. And then on the right, bottom right, as part of this project, the petitioners are actually undergoing a type E administrative subdivision so that they can keep a portion of their property where an existing parsonage is. They'd like to keep that residential and clear of the standalone lot outside of the church buildings. Here we have some site photos. On the left side of the screen is the primary church and a building where they offer a lot of classroom, Sunday school, etc. And this is the actual aisle width, or the aisle that is needing the width variance. You can see here that the buildings are pretty tight. There's also some, I think, HVAC equipment that might also sort of limit any expansion or widening. This area does contain parallel parking, and a lot of it is designated ADA. And so it is actually, all things considered, a very convenient location for these particular kinds of parking spots, just because they are close to the building entrances. And then bottom right photo is just another image of the existing aisle, which again is the component that is not quite meeting the width requirement at the moment. The grassy area in the photo on the top left is essentially where the new paved parking lot expansion is planned. Bottom right photo again is illustrating a portion of the existing parking lot that's already out behind the church. And again, there's ADA parking spots provided here as well. And finally, this is a shot of aisle between the classroom building and the parsonage on the left. And it's that parsonage that you see on the left that was separated or subdivided through the type E. Here we have the petitioner's letter to the Board of Zoning Appeals laying out their requests. In terms of staff recommendation, staff does recommend approval of the design standards variance request from landscaping requirements of Chapter 830 for interior parking lot landscaping requirements, approval of the design standards variance request from landscaping requirements of Chapter 830 for the buffer yard landscaping requirements, and approve recommendation of approval for the aisle width variance request from the parking requirements of Chapter 806. With the following requirement that in that aisle, the petitioner ensures only one-way traffic signage is posted at the entrance of the middle entrance with parking located between the two churches. So with that, I will take any questions.
Are there any questions for staff? Seeing none, is the petitioner here and would they like to speak?
Hello, everyone. This is Daniel Butler with Bynum Fanio and Associates. I'm the civil engineer on the project, and with me tonight is Phil Peden with Redeemer Church. And
Okay. Daniel, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
sorry, yes, I do.
Thank you.
I won't add too much to the presentation. I just wanted to mention that we have been trying to work hard to get what they needed with the expansion of additional parking, but keep the amount of variances or needs in order to make that happen. So I believe over the last few months, we've been working with staff to achieve that and achieve what they were looking for at the same time. Again, just to reiterate what Rebecca was mentioning about we want to keep all of the new parking and the drainage off of that to current standards. So we're not asking for anything on that. It'd just be some of the items that were existing on the site that we can't do too much about. But I will answer, or Phil will answer any questions that you guys might have.
Any questions for the petitioner? Seeing none. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on behalf of this petition? Seeing none, is there anyone here that would like to speak against this petition? Seeing none, is the board member ready with a motion for us?
I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, Skip, go ahead.
I would like to move that we approve variance request 21-35A, 21-35B, and 21-35C, assuming the one-way traffic signage recommended by the city is fulfilled.
I'll second that motion. Larry, you want to call roll for us, please?
Call the roll on variance 21-35A, 35B, and 35C. The variance for development standard variance for landscape parking island, landscape buffer yard, aisle width, respectively, of I vote is a vote to approve all three variance requests. Mary Beth Smartcheck,
Yes.
Vicky Sorensen,
Yes.
Barry Clemens,
Yes.
Bernie Garatoni,
Yes.
Skip Daly.
Yay.
The motion is approved to approve all three variances, subject to the conditions in the staff report in regard to a one-way designation of the aisle.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Next up, we have case number VAR-21-49. And that is Drew. I see you have a recommended motion of continuing. That's Drew. Is this correct?
Yes, so originally when the packet was published for this presentation, what happened was we didn't have enough information on the site plan. So basically staff contacted the petitioner and stated that we needed a little bit more information so that we could come to you tonight with the best information possible to make a recommendation. The petitioner has provided a new updated site plan that I've included in this presentation. So if you want to hear it tonight, I'm more than willing to go ahead and present it, because that was the last piece we were waiting for, was just an
All right.
amended site plan.
Thank you, Drew. Please proceed.
All right, one moment, let me share my screen here. Okay, so this petition is VAR-21-49. It is the Cornwall front yard setback variance. They're requesting one design standards variance from Chapter 833. It's located at 4010 North Maple Grove Road. It's in Bloomington Township, Section 19. It's 3.44 acres, and it's zoned RE1. And the purpose for this front yard setback variance this evening is to amend the front yard setback by 10 feet. The petitioner is planning to construct a 3,330 square foot single family residence on the property, along with an attached garage and some square footage of covered porches. And they are requesting this front yard setback because there are existing Duke Energy line utilities, and they're in easements that are located throughout the property, that is kind of forcing them to build closer to the road with the size that they are requesting for the proposed residence. There's also a septic system proposed location on the northern side of the property, and we'll see all this in the site plan when I get to it. But they felt that the front yard setback was the best way to accommodate their current design plans and stay out of the utility easement and away from the septic field. So here we have some photographs of the property. This is North Maple Grove Road here. We're looking north. On the right picture here, here's the proposed driveway cut that'll come and service the property. Again, the driveway cut will be here, and the home will be, the garage will be more or less right here in front where the car is located, and then it will extend to the north here. So here is another photograph on the right side of the screen. You can see the utility line easement, or excuse me, the utility line. The easement is 50 feet, so 25 feet on either side, according to Duke Energy and conversations with the petitioner. More photographs here of the petition site. If you look closely, you can kind of see some stakes of where the petitioner is expecting the home site to go. And there's some here as well. You can kind of see them in the screen. In the packet, I put in some red lines to highlight where those areas are. So you can kind of see them here again in some of these screens, or these photos, I should say.
We're not seeing any photos at the moment.
You're not?
Nope.
Are you seeing this screen?
Nope.
Have you seen any of the presentation?
We had been seeing screens and photos, yes.
Actually, this is Rebecca speaking. I think I was going through your show for you, Drew, because I didn't know if you were able to share your deck or not. So I had
okay.
some of your slides up while you were talking when I realized yours weren't showing.
Okay. Let me try and share my screen again here. Hold on.
There you go.
All right, there we go. Does everyone see this now?
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so where did I leave off? I left off looking at the utility lines here, showing some more of the pictures of the site. You can kind of see the staked areas in the foreground and background here of these photographs. Here's one, there's one back there, and here's one again. All right, so here is the petitioner's letter to the Board of Zoning Appeals stating why they're requesting the front yard setback, as well as the renewal / modification of a septic permit documentation. Okay, and here we have the most up-to-date site plan. So we have the amended distance that the petitioner is requesting, which is 55 feet from center line. Chapter 833 front yard setbacks are measured from center line, and Maple Grove Road is a major collector, so it's supposed to be 65 feet. You'll note that they have it extended up here to 63 feet, so they can just barely make it up here. And then here are the suggested or the expected utility line easements that the petitioner has drawn in here. Through conversations with Duke Energy, they stated that it's a 50-foot easement on 25 feet on either side. So they're kind of bound by this easement, and then as well as the septic field here, and then the front yard setback, of course. All right, and here's a site plan that I created using our map tools. The yellow lines are the utility lines. And then this black line here is the what would be the 65-foot setback. And these blue lines are just other measurements from those lines. So you'll note that these yellow lines are just where the utility lines are based on the image. It's not necessarily where the easement is. So I guess if you come back 25 feet from this area here, you're gonna get more constrained for where the home site is supposed to be. All right, so planning staff's original recommendation was to continue because we didn't have enough information from the original site plan, but the petitioner has provided that, and we did the presentation this evening. So in lieu of that, planning staff's original recommendation before we found out that there wasn't enough information was actually to deny the front yard setback variance, stating that there is no practical difficulty in redesigning the home to accommodate both the front yard setback as well as staying out of the electrical easements and staying away from the septic field. I will now take any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Drew? Is the petitioner here and would they like to speak? Do you know if the petitioner's here, Drew?
I'm looking through the list here now to see if Melba Cornwell is here.
Are you there? Hello.
There she is. Hello.
There's the Cornwells, yes.
Yes.
Okay, please state your name for the record.
Denny Cornwell.
And Denny, do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed, sir.
Well, I just, to start off with the constraint of, well, where the county approved the septic approval and also the driveway, you know, we're within those constraints. And then also with the easement back there. So, you know, in our view, the only option was to ask for the variance to just move that one corner of the house. So it will put us more parallel with the Duke easement. You know, the problem there, the Maple Grove Road doesn't actually follow that same parallel. So that one area is where we have, you know, the conflict of fitting the existing house plan within that constraints. So, you know, to us, it just seemed like the logical thing just to ask for the 10-foot variance, which would just conflict on the one south corner of the house. And then as it travels to the north, it actually comes back into, within 2 feet of compliance there. So we just thought this would be the easiest way to comply with Duke's requests with what we have. We kind of feel like, and the square footage quoted for the house, really in essence, if you look at the actual house plans, it's only, it's less than 2,000 square feet of living space, plus the garage, which is another 552 feet. So it's, actually kind of a modest sized home in today's standards. And so we really didn't want to do any modifications to that plan. We would just prefer to do the 10-foot variance, which we, it's doesn't really involve anybody else. It's just, a residential build site, and it really is not going to conflict with any other thing other than just that one small corner, which actually kind of turns into like a pie shape, because you're, kind of complying with the setback variance as you near the north end of the house. And then as you drive on down, well, actually, if you're traveling north, before you get to our area, there's existing houses that are not nearly within that setback. So I guess that's all I have to say.
Anybody have any questions? Does any of the board have any questions for Mr. McKenzie?
I've got one, Mary Beth.
Yes, go ahead, Bernie.
Hello, Mr. Cornwell.
Hello.
The question I have, on the stakes that were set out there on the lot, on the parcel, were those stakes that your builder drove in? Did you drive them in? Have you had those surveyed in so you know for sure where all these utility lines, the right of way is, and the placement of everything based on what you're going to need to do?
Yes, we do have a survey.
Great, thank you. I can make a motion, Margaret or Mary Beth, and everybody if it's ready.
Okay, well, is there anyone else here that would like to speak on behalf of this petition? Seeing none, is there anyone here that would like to speak against this petition? Seeing no one that wishes to speak against the petition? Any other questions from the board for Mr. Cornwell or anybody else? Okay, Bernie, if you got a motion, go ahead, please.
The matter of VAR-21-49, the Cornwell front yard setback variance to chapter 833 at 4010 North Maple Grove Road. I move that we approve the variance based on practical difficulties, findings of fact, and the staff's report, and that as a condition that at the time the building permit is filed, that the petitioner have a certified drawing under the seal of a licensed professional land surveyor indicating the easements, the right of way, and the placement of the home, and any other constraints that might restrict the building of the house to where they feel they need it.
Second.
Okay,
Hey, Larry?
the roll call vote is on variance 21-49, development standards variance from front yard setback in regard to the Cornwall property. A favorable vote is to approve the development standards variance based upon the findings with conditions set forth in the staff report, including the condition that a certified site plan of the site be submitted at the time of an approval location permit. Vicky Sorensen,
Yes.
Margaret Clemens,
Yes.
Bernie Veritas,
Yes.
Skip Daly,
Yay.
Mary Beth Dismarcha.
Yes.
The development standard variance 21-49 is approved by a 5-0 vote.
Okay, thank you, and you have a good evening.
Thank you.
Next up, we have case number VAR-21-50. Ann?
Thank you, Mary Beth. So this is a variance from the Environmental Constraints Overlay Area 3, which is the 18% land disturbance slope restriction. So the property is located in Salt Creek Township, Section 18, at 3510 South Oak Ridge Drive. So quick illustration of where the property is located, a little bit far out of town, but on a kind of on a side road of 446, somewhat near Lake Monroe. So the property has mainly steep slopes, over 18%. So on the right is a approximation of steep slopes, and on the left is a pictometry photo from 2002. I'm sorry, 2020. There we go. So I have a lot of site photos to show. This is walking up on Oak Ridge Drive. So we can see our propane tank on the side. I will let the petitioners, discuss why they started their earthwork. So this is an after the fact variance. So need earth land disturbance over 18% would either need a variance. Well, it would need a variance. So what we're looking at now is that there is approximately a half acre of disturbance of more than 18% slope. After the fact variance, so they started this work, the zoning inspector had a complaint, they came and saw them, they immediately stopped work, and we advised them to, stabilize the soil, which they happily did. And so one of the things in order to keep it as is, as the photos show, would be the approval of this variance. So the petition site is steeply sloped, and the negative effects of erosion, is unknown by planning staff, but we know that it is within an eco area. I'll move the photos now. So we are looking kind of north, mainly west, but northwestish. So the petitioners, from what I know, they started to remove some trees that were, possibly in threat of their house of falling, and they decided to kind of create a little yard area. Now there's kind of 3 terraced steps. It is very steeply sloped, where a lot of the debris has been pushed into the ravine behind it. And this is after they've stabilized. So they put down seed and straw. So there's 3 tiers, kind of, it's a little hard to tell. So one of the things on the west side of the house is a ravine that's adjacent to them. It's mostly off their property, but a lot of the debris that was cleared was pushed into this ravine. There also seems to be a land bridge that was either constructed or already existed. I've heard conflicting arguments. or conflicting points from neighbors and petitioner. Either way, there is kind of a land bridge here with this ravine, has a lot of debris in it. So slightly different views. The bottom right, it's hard to tell, but that's the very top of kind of the ravine and looking down. There's a lot of vegetation at top, so it's not really easy to tell. But you can see that it's kind of been seeded and cleared out with the rest of the property. So it makes me kind of think that some of that was also maybe that just the contractor used it and cleared it, but it seems like a pretty important concern for drainage. So kind of a wide angle view on the left of the clearing. The top right photo kind of puts it in perspective as to where the back of the house is. So there we go. So we do recommend, staff recommends denial of the variance request. If this variance is denied, we did request that they also apply for a grading permit, because generally if we were to get a variance request for an eco area, we would ask for a grading permit first or after, so that we can see what the actual, effect would be. So if this variance is denied, we would deny the grading permit. We would keep the enforcement case open, and then we would be able to, staff would recommend the property owner is required to provide a remediation plan that would follow somewhat of this guideline. So planting of native species, tree, shrub, native grasses, perennial, removal of the adjacent, removal of the debris from the adjacent drainage ravine, and then making sure that slope is stabilized.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions for Ann?
Is the audience allowed to ask questions?
No, that would be the board that would be asking
right.
questions. You'll have an
And I'm sorry.
opportunity to speak
All right.
later.
All right. I'm one of the local residents.
Okay, well, we'll give you an opportunity to speak in here in a little bit, sir.
Thank you.
Is the petitioner here, and would they like to speak?
Yes, I am here.
All right.
Yeah,
Can you state your name for us, please?
Sure, Jill Gonterman.
And could you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You can proceed.
Okay. I wrote the letter kind of explaining. So Anne said much of it. We originally took some of the trees down. We had a company come out, and prior, when we first moved in 2 years ago, one came out and we didn't have the money to pay for it at the time. We had a second come out, and both of them had kind of pointed out trees that could be detrimental to the house. So that was what started this project back in March of this year. No, yes, March of this year. And then after that, we were going to get rid of the debris. So that is something on our list to kind of do. We were first not really adding any changes to the landscape in the back, but ultimately just kind of smoothing the ground over. It was a lot of rocks and it's just not the greatest of soil. So kind of just moving it and smoothing it out so that we ultimately could have kind of a yard in the back for our kids to play with and our dogs to run around. We have a little space up front, but it's not a whole lot. And part of the push was this, honestly, coming out of COVID, and not out of COVID, but out of the quarantine phase, being at home with two small children and not having anywhere really for them to go and play, and having all the parks and things shut down, really was kind of a thing of if we could have that and have a safe space for them to be where they're also not playing in the front by the street, coming in and out of the road, was really the purpose behind why we were doing what we were doing in the back. The way that they were moving the dirt around was not to change any of the grades or kind of slopes there. It was just making them even. And then we were going to put grass back there, and then we were going to put some different types of trees back and around the areas. So if the plan would be more for the remediation side, I mean, I'm definitely happy to work with the planning department to make sure that we incorporate things that would add back to it, and then make sure that we're not inhibiting water flow or anything like that as well.
Does the board have any questions for the petitioner?
I have a question. I'll go on, Bernie.
My question is, so the purpose of the clearing was to open up a backyard space and to remove trees that the homeowner, that I'm talking to the petitioner, so the homeowner thought that were dangerous to their house and to anybody in the backyard. Does that sum it up?
Pretty much, yeah.
Vicki, you had a question?
Yes, I was just going to ask, who did the removal of the trees?
Anthony's Tree Service.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And at no time did they mention that there might be a problem?
No, and part of this, all the after the fact stuff was I was not aware all these things needed to be addressed prior to doing anything, and probably my poor due diligence, I put it on the people we were working with to know some of that stuff, and I didn't look into it any further. I went like, we have a septic system in the backyard, so I reached out to the health department prior to all this to see where it was and the plans, and even went as far as to try and find the company that installed it so that we knew that wouldn't be an issue, because that was a concern originally, that it's on that first tier and we didn't want to disrupt that because that could be a bigger issue. But honestly, outside of that, I did put it on I assumed the people we were working with would know that what permits would be needed, and that would just get wrapped up into the price of what we were paying for.
Okay, thank you.
Does the board have any further questions for the petitioner? Okay, is there anyone else here that would like to speak on behalf of this petition? Seeing none, is there anyone here that would like to speak against this petition?
My name is Joseph Hunt, and I'd like to speak.
Okay, sir, you stated your name. Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. So help me God.
Okay, thank you, sir. Continue.
My house was built in 1982, so I have the oldest of the houses that were built in Oak Ridge Estates. So I've been here since 1982. My wife and I were at 3780 South Oak Ridge Drive. And first of all, I want to say I really am sympathetic to the Guntermans and what's gone on here. They're very nice people. I think they just didn't know what they were doing. I have for me, the biggest issue is the south side of the house. And unfortunately, I'm not seeing any good pictures of that. There's what we call in Southern Indiana, now that I'm a Southern Indiana boy, is a holler. And there's a big, deep, steep holler on the south side of their house. It's been there from the Baxter days. The Baxters were, I think, some of the original people here. They still lived in the house where the Gunterman is after the highway was finished. So that was their house originally. But That cut that was done by the Oak Ridge developer in the late 70s, Fred Ginther, was an easement that runs between the Gonterman's property and the what is now the Almonds property. And that we used to always walk down that cut to walk the valleys and the stream and the hill behind us to the west. And a lot of people in the neighborhood did. It was never made into a road. Someone tried to put a road through there in 1996, and the county commissioners at a big meeting told the man to go away and never come back. So we were heavily involved in some of the land use issues here concerning the Lake Monroe drainage. At the bottom of the Gonterman's property, the water feeds out of culverts off of Highway 446. It's basically the headwaters of the stream that runs down across probably 6 or 7 people's property and finds its way down past the end of Oak Ridge, merges with another stream, and goes on to Lake Monroe. So the drainage has always been an issue. In the last 5 years, we've had tremendous storms. The stream is a lot bigger, deeper, and wider than it's ever been. And it's also become a year-round stream with water, sometimes running very fast with all these storms. The holler that's on the south side of the Gunterman's house that's no longer there is a main drain for that end of Oak Ridge to the west, to that major stream. So I'm very familiar with that. I've never seen a land bridge there. I've walked over the years, not so much the last couple of years, down that to get to the valley down there, along with a lot of other people. And there's a steep, as you walk down that with the Gunterman's house on your right, there's a steep drop off of that old cut that was done in the 70s that we walk on. It's a trail now, a steep drop off there. And Mr. Amin who's moved in not too long ago into his house, can attest to that. I'm sorry I don't have pictures of that. On July 23rd, well, let me step back just to correct a few things as I know them. First of all, when the trees were cut, I've been friendly with the Guntermans, and I still am, I hope. But so I used to talk to them quite a bit as I walked by. I talked to Mr. Gunterman and also his wife and kids. But when those trees were all cut on the same weekend, as far as I know, because I was around here, we heard a lot of cutting. 60, and Mr. Gunterman was kind of proud about it. 65 trees were cut down on that hillside in one swatch. And I was told later by one of the other neighbors that they had hired a lawn care company, and the boys that went out there, the men that went out there to cut the trees down, had to rent the chainsaws. So it wasn't even, that's pretty scary if it's not a professional chainsaw, tree stripping group involved there. And I've done a lot of logging myself the last 40 years, so I know something about that. But the neighbors were concerned initially. I was concerned, I can't speak for everyone. I was concerned initially for the Guntermans because of the tremendous erosion they were going to experience. Living here 40 years with a similar slope and a holler, and my back facing, my west side facing a steep cliff down to the stream, I know the erosion that comes through there, and these old oak trees hold it down. Now, I just want to correct something else. The idea that those trees were threatening the house, there may be a couple of trees around the house, but they stripped the hillside all the way down to the headwater, down to the stream, down to their property line at the bottom. So, 40 or 50 of those trees would have never, in any kind of wind or storm, hit that house or go that direction even. Again, on July 23rd, I was walking by. I walk out to the road there with my wife, and we looked to our left. That's the first time I ever saw a land bridge there, and the bulldozer was on it. It was all fresh clay that had just been worked. If there was a bump or a hump down there in the bottom of that holler, that might be what they're talking about. But that was a holler that starts narrow and spreads out. In the old days, it had a refrigerator and some concrete blocks down there. But after they cut those trees, they dumped, I don't know how many giant trees, and some small trees down into that holler and filled it up. And that's the way it's set for a couple months. So at that point, everything had been cut off. So walking by on the road, had there been a land bridge like what we saw on July 23rd, I would have seen it. Because when I saw it, it was literal land bridge, a new land bridge that went all the way up, even with that old cut that we've been walking on so long. There was never any kind of bridge that went across there to that. I know, because it was a steep drop off all the way along there. So I don't know what they're talking about. And there wasn't any sign of any old anything on July 23rd. I used to be in construction, so I know what a new pile of dirt made by bulldozers is. And that was fresh. The dirt was fresh. So that whole story about that, and I heard someone, I don't know if this is in the paperwork, referred to that as a sinkhole. It was never a sinkhole before July when they did that. And I don't know when they did it. I was out of town for a couple weeks. But I've never seen anybody do anything like that with a bulldozer across a holler with no erosion control. And also, I never saw any erosion control from the beginning of this project in March anywhere on that steep slope. And it was left open to erode for several months, as the homeowner would say, before they got the people together to do something about it. Not only was there no erosion control fence, when I didn't see erosion control fence, I didn't look into it. I wasn't trying to be nosy neighbor, but apparently there was no permit for any of this. Anybody that's cutting wood or doing construction or a landscaper on anybody's property surely knows that you need a permit and you need an erosion control fence just about anywhere, let alone on a slope like that that goes down to an important stream. So we're a little bit concerned about this whole business, but from my point of view, that land bridge ought to come out and the holler ought to be restored to somewhat the shape it was. So when we have big storms, that water is going to rush down the holler like it's supposed to. I don't know what, they didn't even put a culvert in it. If you're going to build a dam, you got to put a culvert in it for the water to run under it or something. Anyway, that's my story. If you have any questions, I'm available. I'm sorry my video doesn't work, something about my camera and the Windows computer or whatever. But actually, I'm not hearing now. Do I need to turn my chat off, or are you speaking? Here, I'm off.
Sorry, I was muted. Does the board
all
have
right.
any questions for Mr. Hunt?
I do, and I'm just really curious about this land bridge because the staff report didn't mention it, and Mr. Hunt expressed his experience as number one, a neighbor in the area with some experience, historical experience with the terrain, and number two, as a builder. So I'd like to have more information in detail about that land bridge and what was done and what needs to be done. And, this looks pretty serious to me. So that's my question is, could we have more information about that land bridge?
Anne, what do you know about that land bridge?
So topography, as we're kind of seeing here, this is approximate. As most of our information is. We see a good drainage right here. This is their current home, but where we kind of see their drainage is here.
I'm speaking of the south side along that property line, if you can hear me. You see where that curve is, that's the hillside on the south.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know you know better, but let me.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt.
So what I've seen is only after the fact, which is filled. I did not look so closely that I know that little land bridge is filled. I have heard from the petitioners that was existing. I have heard from neighbors that it was not existing. So I don't have a good answer for you.
Can I elaborate on that while you've got the map up? Is it possible?
I think I think the BZA can talk first and then.
All right,
Yes,
fine.
thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Hunt. Thank you, Ann. Margaret, do you have any more questions on that or?
Well, I think the request was, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Hunt? And
Right.
that was my question to Mr. Hunt.
All right,
Okay.
Mr. Hunt has an answer here. And leave that map up, she had her mouse up there. Now, if she can move her mouse down to the south side of their property, go down the road right there, see that line, that property line? That property line corresponds to where that cut is. I don't know if that cut, I thought that cut was right on the edge. So it was my thinking, without knowing what the survey is, that they were probably trespassing on Mr. Amin's property there by even being up on that cut. But that's what that property line corresponds to, where that cut, where that, what is now a trail after, 40 years. And there was a steep drop off to the right, and that holler is just on the Gunterman's property along that line, around that corner that follows the property line. That, you see that curvature, that's the curvature of the hill where it drops off. And
You
so
are
if
right. You are right. I was putting my mouse in the
And the
wrong
land
spot.
bridge, yeah, the
This is
land
the
bridge,
ravine. Yep.
that so-called, I don't know what I'm seeing that's dark there. Is that where they planted or did something? I'm not
So
sure. I
the
see
red color on this screen is slopes greater than 18%, which would
Right.
be restricted for, this.
But was that measured after they did the land bridge?
This was a measurement done in 2012, I think.
All right, because I looked at it. I've looked at a
Pardon me.
topo and I don't
Pardon
have
me,
a deep- yeah.
I believe we need to be careful of that last statement that was made by the gentleman speaking, that you stated that they did the land bridge that's been entered into evidence.
Yeah, I thought they did, because I saw a bulldozer on it shaping it, and it had never been seen there in 40 years of living here, and I walked a lot. That's
Right.
all I was trying to say.
Oh,
I'm
so
not a lawyer.
if I can speak, I think ultimately everybody should respect their property boundaries. So hopefully that's a thing right now. They're conscious of that. The idea right now is that they've expanded their property. They've expanded the grading and the slope.
Right. What about the drainage on Oak Ridge? How do we restore the drainage if what I'm saying is determined to be accurate by you folks? Because there's not a culvert in that bridge, and that's where the water comes rushing. That's why there's a holler there, because of the water flow over the last 50 years.
That is included, because no matter what, there were tree tops and other vegetation debris dumped in that ravine, and it should be cleared. So this was reviewed by our county MS4 coordinator.
All right.
Who says clear that out.
Well, however, I guess when they clear that, they'll see that land bridge is blocking it. It's blocking the holler. It cut it in two. So I don't know where the water is going to go.
Can I, if I may speak, the land bridge where he had seen the bulldozer, the dirt that was brought into the back, we didn't want to bring dirt off site, was taken from the trail he's talking about, which prior we did have a property survey done. So that is all within our property boundary. And so the bulldozer went over it back and forth to bring the dirt. It didn't create it. It probably made it sturdier, but that path was always there. And the only reason, even we had neighbors that when there was a bunch of branches and brush up at the front of the road where you couldn't get onto the path, they would come into our side yard, walk through our backyard, and then cross over to get to that trail. So that thing has always been there as long as we have lived here. Now, I won't speak to years ago because I don't know, but for the 2 years we've been there, it's been a part of it.
So I cannot speak to what Ms. Gutterman just said, but I will say that our GIS is a tax parcel overlay of aerial imagery, which is curved, and there are normally some discrepancies, but not a lot. There are some discrepancies. So to see that their parcel, it would take a surveyor to truly tell us where their boundary is and whether or not that includes that ravine.
I do have a copy of the survey that was conducted by Bynum, Fanyo, and the group that was on here earlier. They came out and surveyed the property.
When was that survey done?
March of this year.
This is Dave Amin. I'm the next door neighbor.
Okay.
Their survey is correct. Because I also had it surveyed, and the pathway is and always has been on their property.
Okay. Thank you, Dave.
This is Joseph Hunt again. I'd stand corrected. In 1996, the man that was going to build a road claimed it belonged to Oak Ridge Estates. So there was a discrepancy back in 95 or 96. Maybe that's where the discrepancy is about who owned the easement. But that was all part of Oak Ridge Development, not part of the Baxter's property. At the time, that was the understanding by the County Planning Commission and the County Commissioner. So I stand corrected but that's not my issue. I'm just concerned about the holler, which is on the Gunterman.
Thank you,
property.
Mr. Hunt.
Thank you. Bye.
Bernie, you have your hand up.
If I can interrupt, technically, this property is actually not involved in the subdivision. From what I can tell, it is not in the subdivision. Not
You're
sure how
correct in
looks
that.
right now, but for the record.
Okay. Bernie, did you have your hand up?
I did. Just kind of sorting through this the best I can. So have we cleared up the quote land bridge issue along the south side of the property with the neighbor to the south saying that the survey that was done illustrates the path has been there and the ravine that we're talking about?
No, this is Dave Amin. I didn't say that. What I said is their survey is correct. The pathway I was talking about was from the street down to toward the creek. The ravine is in their property, and there may have been a small walking path, but it was nowhere near the size it is today when we moved in 6 years ago.
Dave, I'm afraid nothing you say is on the record until you're sworn in.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, Dave?
So I do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Skip. Kind of losing control here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know you were starting to have concerns about the surveys. I had my property surveyed, and because initially I thought I had the opening of the path was on my property from a drawing I had, but then I actually had it surveyed, and I actually told the Guntermans that I was wrong and that opening on the road was on their property.
Okay.
But I also I never saw that large land bridge the way it is until recently. Now, I was gone until almost April, sometime early April from this winter. And that's when we first started noticing things.
Okay. All right.
We're also very concerned about the drainage. I mean, my property is about 3 or 4 feet higher than theirs, so any water that goes into our yard will drain into their yard and into that path. So any blockage there is a real problem for me.
Mary Beth, I've still got a question. So without anybody interrupting, Ann, would you do me a favor and would you show with the mouse on the screen with the slope map where that land bridge or path is relative to the aerial.
Yep, I can do that. Let me find a good photo. All right, sorry for flipping so much. Well, so it's right here, just based on contours, it's right here. So land bridge is right about here.
Did that answer your question, Bernie?
Well, I'm getting to that. So my understanding from Miss Gunterman is that there was already a crossing across that drainage way and they did not create it. Is that correct, Miss Gunterman?
That is correct.
Okay, and the tractor, the bulldozer that was on the property was utilizing that to be able to cross the ravine, but did not construct it. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
Okay, so the other ravine on the property that we're talking about is, go over to your right if you would please, Ann, on the red map, on the slope map, yeah. So the other ravine, keep going, is right there. Is that correct? That there's debris and things in that ravine?
Yep.
That's all. Okay, that's it for me, Mary Beth. Thank you. I'll have some more questions once we get through with the public.
Okay. Any questions for the petitioner or any of the witnesses that have spoken so far? Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak against this petition? Seeing none. Are any of the board members ready to make a motion?
I've got a question, Mary Beth.
Okay.
Okay, so if I look at what we have recommended with the staff, if we make a recommendation, if we deny the variance, then the enforcement issue goes through, and then the county goes back and forth with the petitioner with threats and compliance or however else we deal with enforcement issues. But that's up in the air for enforcement. If we have a recommendation, if we have an approval, then we can actually put conditions with the approval that may get the remediation of the site in a better condition than what we would do in enforcement action. And I know that's all predictable. I'm not asking you to have a crystal ball, but I'm just asking if I'm thinking correctly from a 30,000 foot view. Go ahead, Ann.
So we would, with an enforcement action, which if we deny the variance, deny the grading permit, we can say you have to do these things, and if you do not, then there will be fines or legal action. So it's better than a variance. A variance is saying what you've already done is okay, unless you're really specific, like conditions. But what we're recommending is deny the variance that will deny the grading permit. And then we can say remediate, provide a remediation plan that has the native species, that clears out that drainage, that meets the MS4 coordinator, that stabilizes slope. And if they don't, then there's enforcement action. But if there's a variance, there's no enforcement.
Gotcha.
there has to be a very specific plan for a variance. And right now we have what has happened, and we would like to see some remediation, if that helps.
Skip, do you have a question?
I do, thank you. And it's for some clarification. I don't know if this follows the pecking order or not, but perhaps my question is for Anne. So the variance is for work that has already been done, and you're suggesting that we deny it and put and then have compliance for remediation happen, as opposed to just us putting remediation caveats in there to approve the variance. And I'm trying to understand the difference between the two at this point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the variance is supposed to be like, you know, a special exception to the ordinance. And right now, staff does not necessarily see like a special recommendation. We don't see a good middle ground for a special recommendation. So what we're thinking is that it does need to be re-imitated, but it's not worth a variance. It is not worth an after the fact, you cleared a lot of land and graded slope. It's more, we have more action that is legally responsible under an enforcement case rather than a variance. Does that help?
Why can't before this, why prior to coming to the board did you not work out that middle ground remediation with the petitioner?
Absolutely. A variance is an option. So the variance is, hey, can we keep it this way? That's the request. Can we have it exactly how it is? And if not, we go into enforcement. So this variance request is to keep it how it is now.
Gotcha.
We're recommending no.
Obviously.
Let's do some remediation.
Okay. So to answer your question, Skip?
And if I can.
Sort of it does. I think I think it's fine for this point.
Can I clarify that I just based on this, there was no expectation that we were going to leave it as is, that this isn't the where we were going with it, with all the debris and everything else. It was more to it. So I guess with that, if it's more of a remediation plan that makes sense, then that probably is in line with what we were wanting to do going forward as well.
Okay. All right. Skip?
I think Bernie first. I'm sorry.
Bernie?
Yeah, okay. So my only reason for asking that question was because I've seen these enforcement actions in the past. And sometimes if conditions can be move things along a little bit more predictable and keep things moving, because then they've got the variance in front of them. That was the only reason why I asked that question. So I guess Ms. Gunterman, have you spoken with a professional to come up with a remediation plan so you have an understanding as to what that commitment may be?
I haven't. My communications kind of until after the stop work order was wait and see what the board says, and then that will decide how this process goes further for you. So I have not. I've just been kind of waiting for today to see what the recommendation was going to be and then move forward with it afterwards. That I was told not to do anything else, that even with that, there's a couple of like stumps and things that I would like to get cleared off of the land, but I don't know if that's approved or not, or like how this would even look going forward. So we just haven't done anything because of that other than seed and straw it.
Let me just, and I hate to delay this a month because it's the time of the year that these things need to get going. But I'm almost wondering if we don't go ahead and continue this and give the Guntermans an opportunity to really get somebody involved in this, to come up with a plan, knowing what the county's goals are. And I don't think that we've lost anything, because the county wants to see remediation anyway. And the Guntermans aren't planning on leaving the site the way it is. And I think that I don't think that this is going to delay the process, because it maybe we get here next month and the county says, yeah, they're working on a remediation plan and they're working towards our goals. Does that make sense to anybody?
I agree with you, Bernie.
I think that we should probably, if we deny and go ahead and just, what it does is it lets the staff go ahead and work on that remediation plan with them. If we deny the variance, if we pass the variance, then it's leaving it as it is now. And I think it's just best to go ahead and let them do their enforcement action, so they can let them know what they need to do to remediate the property correctly. Larry, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I was going to suggest before Bernie suggested that the board might want to continue this matter and instruct the petitioners to come back with a remediation plan that meets the concerns of the staff, a plan for replanting and revegetating the slopes, for removal of debris, addressing any drainage ravine, and for stabilization of the slope. And that could be presented for the board and put in the form of written commitments if the board granted the variance at that time. And that way it could be resolved without the need for enforcement and litigation, yet there would be a binding agreement on the petitioner to complete the remediation. And I will note that in my experience, remediation of these steep slopes is not inexpensive because of just the nature of, you remove 60 trees, it's not cheap to revegetate. So, but I think the burden should be on the petitioner to come forth with a plan to do that. That could be submitted to the board. The county can comment on the plan, make additions, I mean, come up with something that would be binding without the need to turn it over to enforcement. Does that make sense?
I'd ask my members, I'd ask the members to indulge me just one more point, that I don't see this board granting any variance without conditions. And I think that if the petitioner can go ahead and educate themselves with the county and with somebody that's qualified to do such, go ahead and develop a plan so that they can hit the ground running now. And because we're going to have conditions on any approval, I'm 99.9% sure. So let's go ahead and get started with that. And at least staff can have a hand in, and then the MS4 operator and have a hand in getting something that's palatable to the county. So that's all I've got. Thanks for that indulgence.
Okay. So do we move that this be continued?
I move that this.
Okay.
I will formally move that this variance request be continued, and in the 30-day interim, the county and the petitioner communicate and put a plan together. As it is, the cart is before the horse.
Well, one thing I would just
yeah.
with this, can we put the burden on the petitioner to put together the plan?
Yes.
Bring it forward rather than staff. We have plenty of plans to review without trying to create a new plan.
Right. The burden is on the petitioner to do that. Margaret, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just, you know, am thinking about actually what was just raised by Larry, by Mr. Wilson, that having the county involved like this is not free. And we do need to have some discouragement from this type of action from taking place. And, you know, I'm just thinking of all the time that the staff is putting in and that they're going to.
Has already put in.
And has already put in, and all the review and the MS4 coordinator. And, you know, that concerns me. I think that some punitive action, you know, for especially slope disturbance sends a message. So I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
So you do not believe it should be continued, Margaret?
Well, well, continuance still allows us to enforce. So I guess, you know, I hear my colleagues, and Mr. Wilson recommended a continuance, and that matters to me. But boy, that looks like drastic action that was taken without any consideration for county approval. That I don't know how someone does that, you know, without thinking you better check with the office. You know, I just don't understand that. You know, it just doesn't make common sense to me. So it's rather alarming to me. So, you know, as Larry said, they're going to have a huge expense planting a bunch of trees, but boy, that's a big mess up. Okay, that's
yes,
what
it is. All right, and Skip, your hand is still up. Okay, Larry, your hand is still up as well.
I'm sorry, I will lower it.
That's okay. All right, Skip, did you want to make a motion, or did somebody want to make a motion?
Can I make a note?
Okay.
Thank you. So it's more of a matter of process here, which Larry can correct me. A variance would approve whatever they've done here. We have no conditions on this variance. If it was an open enforcement case, we could require them to do the actions that were listed. And if
in other words, if we deny this case as you recommend, we can require them to do the actions and formulate a plan and do the actions that have been recommended.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yep. Thank you, Mary Beth.
And that would be probably a shorter process than continuing it and coming back and doing it all over again. Okay. On those grounds.
I believe I have a motion that is still standing on the table.
Okay. And your motion, repeat your motion, Skip.
I move that we continue this for a period of 30 days and request communication between the petitioner and the county to put a plan together to fix the problem.
Okay, here's the only problem I see with your motion. It is on the petitioner to put the plan together and bring it to the county. It is not on the county to do that. But if Skip has made a motion, does anyone want to second it?
Second.
Okay, Larry, call the roll.
Okay, the motion is continue variance 21-50, Eco Area 3 variance for 30 days to allow for the submission of a plan to remediate the site, including planting native species, stabilizing the slope, and removing any debris affecting drainage. A motion, yes, is to approve the continuance. Margaret Clements.
No.
Bernie Veritas.
Yes.
Skip Daly.
Yeah.
Meredith Smarchik.
No.
Vicki Sorensen.
No.
Okay, the motion for continuance fails.
Okay, we're open for a new motion.
I'd like to endorse the staff's recommendation of denial regarding a VAR-21-50, and that is a recommendation of denial of the variance request, and that it will be referred to an enforcement case, and To become compliant, the staff recommends that the property owner be required to submit and follow a remediation plan. If action is avoided by the property owner, the open enforcement case will allow the county to pursue fines and legal action. So I recommend that we deny this variance request. And that's my motion.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, the motion is to deny the variance request 21-50, Government Eco Area 3 variance based on the findings and recommendation of the staff report. Again, a vote of yes is a vote to deny the variance. Bernie Haas.
I've got a question on the motion. Mary Beth.
Okay.
So the last sentence that Margaret read is if action is avoided by the property owner, the open enforcement case will allow the county to pursue fines or legal action. Why do we have that in a motion from the Board of Zoning Appeals?
I put that in there because staff recommended this as the motion. So I just read it verbatim.
Beyond our scope of power, isn't it? President?
That is a clarification for what we can do in an enforcement case. So maybe it's, yes, Larry can speak to, maybe that's beyond what BZA can say, but I was including that sentence as a clarification that we would move this beyond BZA. It was not.
Let me try repeating the motion and I'll try to incorporate it appropriately. The motion is to deny the variance based upon the findings on the grounds that this will allow enforcement to continue by the county. That means it's not a basis that BZA directing what will be done, but just that will allow enforcement to continue. Does that make?
Yes, thank you for clarifying.
Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
I'd like to amend my motion as Mr. Wilson stated.
Okay, let me restart the roll. Again, a vote of yes, a vote to deny the variance. Bernie Garitas.
No.
Skip Daly.
Nay.
Mary Beth Smarchek.
Yes.
Vicky Sorensen.
Yes.
Margaret Clemens.
Yes.
The variance is denied by a 3-2 vote.
Thank you. Okay, next up we have case number VAR-21-52. And this is Rebecca.
This was going to be my last one, I think. They've got plenty of people on this.
Okay. Okay, so this is variance or petition VAR-21-52 for Shaw side yard setback variance to chapter 833 for one parcel that contains 5.33 acres in Van Buren Township. And the property is currently zoned RE 2.5. And under the comp plan, it is zoned Makua employment. The request is for a design standard variance from the side yard setback in order to construct a 50-foot by 25-foot addition on an existing pole barn that's on the property already. The addition is permitted in this zone. However, the structure that is currently on the lot is not meeting side setbacks. And so before any further expansion of the existing structure can be done, a variance must be approved. This lot is actually a corner lot, which means it has 2 front yards and 2 side yards. And the required side yard setback in this zone is 30 feet. And the structure as it sits at the moment encroaches roughly 8 feet on the eastern side yard and 3 feet on the southern side yard. So it's a little bit deficient. Here we have some site photos. On the left is the existing structure and the proposed location of the new addition will be located here. You can see my cursor. This photo on the right is just a picture of the entrance onto this property. Some more pictures, just illustrating the space. This is in Wright Road. Again, here on the right, you can see the existing structure. Here to the side of the existing structure is where the addition is going to go. And petitioner states that the addition will be used to store vehicles. Once again, site photos, and on the right, you see the property marker sign displayed there at the intersection. Here we have the petitioner site plan on the right, on the left side of the screen, and on the right side is their letter to the Board of Zoning Appeals. This petition did receive one letter of support. So an adjacent neighbor wrote in to say that he does not have any issues with the proposed addition. And he is, like I said, the adjacent property owner. Staff recommendation, staff recommends approval of the side yard setback design standard based on findings of fact. And with that, I will take any questions.
Any questions for Rebecca? Seeing none, is the petitioner here and would they like to speak?
Yes, I'm here.
Would you like to speak, sir? You do not have to if you do not want to.
Yes, I would. You want to swear
Okay,
me in?
you just state your name and state your name, sir.
Robert Shaw.
Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
I would say that having been a builder for more than 40 years, I have never personally built in a setback. In this particular instance, it was 19 years ago, but as I recall, and I did search for the old zoning code, but did not come up with it. I believe the setbacks were reduced when I built the building. They are presently 30 feet, and I am not in compliance. The side yard is my brother who wrote the letter of support, and it's for his use that I was going to add on because he wanted somewhere to store his vehicles. And the other setback is for the railroad. And as Bernie can tell you, their right of way is 50 feet on my side. So I'm about 78 feet from their rail. So in that area, that whole section has been rebuilt about 5 years ago, and all the rail was welded solid, and all the supports that were defective were replaced. So it's good rail and it's straight. There should be no problem. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Does the board have any questions for Mr. Shaw? Seeing none. Is there anyone else here that would like to speak on behalf of this petition? Is there anyone here that would like to speak against this petition? Seeing none, we're ready for a motion.
I'd like to move that in case number VAR-21-52, that with regard to the side yard setback to chapter 804, that we approve Mr. Shaw's request for a variance, and based on the findings of fact and of practical difficulties.
I'll second the motion.
Yeah, I'll call the roll on variance 21-52, Bill Petitioner variance for side yard, Shaw petition. The motion is to approve based upon the findings. Yes vote is motion to approve. Yes vote is to approve the variance. Bernie Garitas.
Brief comment. Of course, I'm not representing the railroad this evening, but you know, what Mr. Shaw said about the setback, two things. I don't remember those setbacks originally being 30 feet. And then for some reason, and it may not apply to agro reserve, which I think is this property, but I thought along railroad corridor, some of those setbacks were actually reduced. I'm in favor of the variance, so I'll vote yes, but I think maybe have staff check that out one more time, because there's something that's nagging at me that those variances are a little awkward along the railroad, and I don't remember the 30 feet with agro reserve. Thanks. That's all I got.
Skip Daly.
Yay.
Meredith Marchuk.
Yes.
Vicky Sorensen.
Yes.
Barb Clemens.
Yes.
Variance is approved by a 5-0 vote.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. You have a great evening.
Thank you for your vote and for your service.
Thank you, sir. Next up, we have case numbers VAR-21-53A, VAR-21-53B, and VAR-21-53C. And Drew, this one's yours.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So this is the Perry Buildable Area 15% Slope Variance, Chapter 804, the Perry Eco Area 3 Variance, Chapter 825, and the Perry Front Yard Setback Variance to Chapter 833. So this is actually a new submission for a previous petition that we've heard at this board. There is a provision in the ordinance that allows for a reapply after a decision is made with a new petition. So the petitioner made some adjustments to their plan and has come to you this evening with a new variance request for these three variances that you've heard once before. So as a refresher, this property is located on South Spring Branch Road. It is in Perry Township, Section 13, and it's zoned Estate Residential 2.5 and is located in the Eco Area 3 designation of Chapter 825. All right, so the petitioner this time around is proposing a 1,860 square foot single family residence with a 624 square foot attached garage, a 564 square foot of deck/porch space. The total footprint of the proposed residence is 3,048 square feet. The previous proposed residence total square footage was 3,312 square feet. All right. So again, similar to last petition, neither the slope waiver nor the slope exception would be granted to this property, although it is almost entirely in 15% slopes. And mostly in 18% slopes, and that was a determination made by planning staff and the planning director. Staff has recommended in the past a 2-story redesign of the proposed structure to assist in minimizing the slope disturbance, as well as the recommendation to include the front yard setback to minimize slope disturbance as well. Here we have the slope map. As you'll note, majority of the property is over the 15%, and a good portion of it as well is over the 18%. Here we have the site photographs. You'll note the gradual decline in grade in the right-hand photograph. And then just more pictures here of the petition site and seeing that gradual decline into the ravine. Just clicking through these photographs here. All right, so this table is in your packet. It summarizes the differences between the new proposed residence and the previously proposed residence from the previous petition. So you'll note there's a difference, a 14.4% reduction in the first floor footprint of the new proposed residence. There's a reduction in the size of the garage from 672 square feet to 624 square feet. And there's also a reduction in the deck space. So it was 612 and now it's 564 square feet. Overall, a total of 12% in reduction in footprint, and as well as an estimated reduction of 20% in encroachment into the 18% slopes area. So planning staff made some calculations using the provided site plans. The original proposal had 2,213 square feet of encroachment into the 18%, and now they only have 1,830 square feet of encroachment into the 18%. Okay, so here we have the two iterations, I should say, of the site plan. It's kind of hard to see at this level of view, so I went ahead and zoomed in on the one. This is the new one. So we had the surveyor put in the 18% slope line here that cuts right through the proposed residence, and you'll note the 15% slope line over here. So basically the entirety of the property is over 15%, and that's the Chapter 804 buildable area requirement. And then this 18% line here is the Chapter 825 requirement. And here is the previously proposed original residence plan. So I tried to line them up as best as I could so that we could toggle back and forth to see kind of the subtle differences and changes and reduction in size of the two iterations here. And we can come back to this if we have questions. Here we have the new proposed schematic of what they are intending to build. And here we have the previous proposed schematic, so we can do some more comparison here as well. I will note that there are some measurement discrepancies within the schematics compared to the site plans. So we will want to get that confirmed with the petitioner's representative to make sure that which one they'll actually be building with comparing the two. Okay, here we have the septic permit from the health department as well as their suggested septic field location. And I also included one of the exhibits that's included in the packet. This is an email conversation with staff, specifically the director and the petitioner's representative, kind of articulating that the waivers would not be available to them, as well as the suggestion of perhaps redesigning the home structure to reduce the amount of disturbance as much as possible, as well as utilize that front yard setback to further reduce the encroachment. We did receive some letters of support for this petition this time around. I've included those here, and 3 out of the 4 are included in your packet as well. A 4th one came in after the packet's publishing, so I included it here for your review, and we can go through these if you'd like. I imagine that there will be quite a bit of public comment for this petition, so we will wait to see if anyone else has more comments for this. Okay, so staff recommendation is very similar to the previous recommendation. and that is staff recommends denial of the buildable area 15% slope variance, as well as the eco area 3 slope variance, in that there are no practical difficulties, stating that the slope issues could be further addressed through more efforts in redesigning the development / building / structure. Planning staff felt that more of the front setback could be utilized to pull out of the 18% slopes, as well as a more redesign with keeping the slopes in mind and protecting them. Staff does maintain a recommendation of approval for the front yard setback variance from Chapter 833, saying that the encroachment to the front yard setback would lead to less disturbance of sloped areas and align the structure with other residences along South Spring Branch Road. I will now take any questions.
Drew, I have a question, or Mary Beth. I just wonder, what does the previous request have to do with the current request? I mean, it really is an independent request, isn't it?
Yes, it's an independent request. Basically, I included information from the previous request in here so that we could see and quantify the changes that they have made. So it's more or less a reference.
Thank you so much, Drew. Thank you.
Mhm.
Any more questions for Drew? Is the petitioner here and would they like to speak?
Yes, please.
Okay, please state your name.
I'm Mark Perry, and I'm here with my wife, Clara.
Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, sir?
I certainly do, so God help me.
All right, you may speak.
And I'm Clara Perry, and we own this lot in Inverness Woods, and we will hope that you will consider our new proposal.
All right. Did you have anything further you wanted to say?
Yes, as my understanding is that this is a buildable lot. And we purchased it under that assumption 13 years ago and have paid taxes on it since. So the question, if I'm catching the drift of the whole evaluation here, is how much of a footprint would be tolerated? And the exact location of that footprint, as opposed to not having any structure on the land.
Okay, is that a question you had?
Yeah, is that correct?
For staff or, yeah.
For anyone that can tackle this issue.
Michael Carmen, you have your hand up. Okay. Does anybody, can anybody answer Mr. Borgman's question?
Yes. So with this petition, we have 3 variances that are being requested with the buildable area, 15% slope, eco area 3, and front yard setback. In the previous petition, there was some conversation about whether or not this petition site is a legal lot of record. Planning staff was unable to confirm nor deny that it is a legal lot of record based on the evidence that was provided at the time. But I have heard from the petitioner's representative and previously that they do have some statements to say about that. So I think now would be the time for that kind of conversation to be had.
Okay, Mr. Borgman, it says here you are the applicant. Is that true?
Yes, I filed a petition on behalf of the Perrys.
Okay, Mr. Bergman, do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
All right. And Mr. Carmen, are you here representing these people?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure who we're dealing with here. I didn't see you listed on here. So, and I do not have to swear you in as you are an attorney. So whichever of you would like to speak, please proceed.
Well, I'll go first. So As a refresher from the last BZA, yes, this petition was denied. And I believe it was Mary Beth who did ask the planning department if they had any recommendations as far as a redesign, what they would accept or what they would want to see. Going back and reviewing the video, planning did not make a recommendation on a redesign to the development plan and or the house. That they have since, in this staff recommendation, asked to move the house further and to add a second story. So when working with the Perrys on the redesign, you know, there were four issues that were brought up. Number one was the character of the neighborhood. Number two was the lot of record. Number three was the septic system. And number four was erosion control. As far as the septic system, you know, that is out of everyone's hands. That's determined by the health department. They place it based on public safety. And we feel confident that it's in the best location. So as far as the redesign, we based everything on the character of the neighborhood. I don't know if crew can go back to the site plan or not, but we do show the existing houses to the north and south of there as well. We're trying to keep square footage wise a very similar footprint. We're trying to keep a very similar distance off the road. I know one of their concerns was not having the house up close to the road. So we're trying to stay roughly the 40-foot back, the same as they are. We do think this style house fits best in this neighborhood. And that was the goal of the redesign. As far as the legal lot of record and the erosion, I'll let Mike talk more about that, but I do know that he has looked in with his title company into the legal lot of record. And I'll let him talk about that and the commitment as well for the erosion control.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Borgman. Does the board have any questions for Mr. Borgman? No? Mr. Carmen?
Thank
please
you.
Proceed.
Thank you. With regard to the legal lot of record, actually, I thought the staff report equivocated on that issue, but I don't think there's any question that the lot as described and as defined clearly dates back to 1978. And actually, I think there's a somewhat confusing set of deeds out of the Inverness Woods area that would suggest that it really goes back to 1968. But I think even the staff in investigation of deeds goes back to 78. And what's significant about 78, this is former fringe area. The zone on this is an old city zone, the RE 2.5. This has been, counties had control of this for 23 years and have chosen to leave the residential zoning on this as the apparently appropriate zone. And so we're here trying to get approval to get a house on it, and it cannot be done without a variance. Oddly, I think the staff report needed to be thought through a little bit more on its conclusions, because it says no practical difficulties, and yet the staff report clearly indicates that any construction on here is still going to violate the 15% slope area and that buildable area. So in fact, there are practical difficulties because there is no structure that can be built on this, no residence can be built on this property without a variance. The staff report is an exercise in line drawing. Where do we draw the line of what's tolerated? As staff, as was suggested earlier, the question of what is tolerable in terms of encroachment into the slope areas. And we'll suggest this is a reasonable structure in several respects. One of the exhibits that Todd prepared that's in the packet shows the position of the properties north and south to show you this is very much on the same line, particularly the one to the south. The one to the north is a little bit more 15-degree slope than it's, and not the 18-degree slope area, but is very much along the same line as that one. Those structures are been in existence, as we know, and this has been discussed before, that those would have the same problem if they were being built now, because the slope restrictions, the ECO overlays, all of this came into place after those structures were built. Certainly they came into place after this lot was already existing as a standalone residential zoned lot. And so now we're confronted, there is no practical use of this property as zoned without a variance, because there's no structure that can be fully compliant. So to me, that becomes the question of reasonableness. Now, there's been no indication that the structure to the south, the Chadwick property, I believe it is, or the one to the north, pose any current problems that they're the source of or cause of erosion or other adverse conditions that the slope restrictions are intended to avoid. that those are in, the grounds are stabilized, vegetation stabilized, trees are in place, and the structure in place. And by all indications that those are being used without any causing any difficulty. The commitment that the petitioners offered on this is intended to get to that same place. If in fact the existence of a structure on the slope is not the problem, it's the disturbance of soils during construction and for a period of time after construction until soils are stabilized, the vegetation is regenerated. That's exactly what the commitment the petitioner has proposed with this is intended to do. Get us to that point, get us through construction with the proper erosion control plan, MS4 coordinator approval, and implement that to get the structure in place, keep those erosion control measures in place until the ground is stabilized, which means vegetation reestablished, and we will be in no different position than the lot to the south of us, exactly the same place. That is a reasonable use of the variance. The practical difficulties are basically admitted to by the staff report and would suggest that the variance could and I believe should be approved, but certainly the conditions of approval, something along the lines of what we proposed in the commitment. The reason for doing it as a commitment is so it appears and gets recorded, appears in the records, the deed records, and rather than just as a condition of approval in a BZA report, which never gets recorded. So this would put that restriction in the public records and would suggest that that is a reasonable measure to move forward. One of what Todd, or I think Mr. Perry actually was alluding to, we've had a staff report in the two petitions now that says changes need to be made, but there's no guidance. And as I watched the tape from the first petition last month, it seems to me there was requests being thrown at you asking for some guidance, and I didn't see anything coming back. And I understand that. I'm not sure that's really your province to be doing that, but that certainly is a problem. How many times does the petitioner come forward with a proposal to say, nope, not good enough, try again? Nope, not good enough, try again. Move it another foot? No, wait, we can't tell you how far to move it. We'll just keep trying until you get to a point we'll say, okay. I mean, that's not acceptable. I don't think that's what you intend, but that's kind of the position that we're in right now of being required to guess what is tolerable, can be tolerated, what is acceptable. If completed structures, stabilized soils are not the problem, and they clearly are not on the lots to the north and south of us, then a condition of approval that would help ensure that that's where we get following construction and during the time of construction is a reasonable condition that would allow you to approve the variance and would suggest that that they are. The staff, I'm a fan of these newer staff reports we're seeing, by the way. I'll call them the leaner and meaner staff reports, not meaner in the sense of being harsh, but shorter, more condensed. The problem on this one is I don't find any staff findings laid out on the criteria that you're used to seeing. And that does make it a little bit harder, creates a little bit more work, I think, at your level for somebody on a motion. But I would suggest findings that we're not causing harm to adjacent properties or the use and value of adjacent properties. It does not violate what I call the police power issues of public harm and those criteria A and B. When you get to C, that's the unusual circumstances, peculiar difficulties, we get different terms for it sometimes, that those are satisfied with this petition. It cannot be developed as is zoned, as the county has chosen to leave it zoned for 23 years now that you've had zoning control over it. Would ask that you would approve the variance with the conditions of approval as outlined in the proposed commitment. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Carmen? Larry, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I think we have a procedure where we can grant a waiver from ECO. The problem you get into is if you go to the pictures of the site through, we're not talking just like, oh, it's 15% slope or it's greater than 18% slope. It's a drop off, a significant drop off from the house. And when we're evaluating these things, it's not whether or not you can get a 2,400 square foot house in the buildable area. We spend hours in front of the Plan Commission talking about how the appropriate size for a house now is 600 to 800 square feet. And if you can get an 800 square foot house on the site, again, it's hard for us to argue that, or it's hard for us to grant a waiver from a situation where the size of the buildable area limits the type and the size of house that can be built. I just wanted to clarify that it's not just being arbitrary, it's that if you can put a house of some type on the site without a variance, then we cannot recommend a variance. And that is the basis for our recommendation of denial is if you bought a lot with basically no buildable area, it's the kind of lot you bought, and you probably paid an appropriate price for a lot with very little buildable area. And accordingly, the type of house you can put on that lot may be limited. And again, that is the basis for our recommendation of denial.
Okay, Mr. Carmen, your hand is up.
Couple of comments in response to Larry's. You look at the exhibit Todd prepared, it shows the 15-degree slope line. There is no place even for a 600-foot house. And I don't know who's concluding that a standard residence these days is 600 or 800 square feet. That's where we're getting into line drawing, and those are never good arguments to try to. That's all value oriented, depending on the speaker. But you can see the 15 slope line up there does not leave room for anything. So the variance is required to do anything. Then if you look at the structures north and south, they're larger than this proposed footprint. It's less than that. And so the petitioner buys a piece of property that the county has left zoned as RE 2.5, a residential zone. There's really no other real use in that, permitted in that zone outside of the residential uses. And now they're being told, yep, but you can't build a house on it. That doesn't make sense. The slope regulations came into place long after this lot existed as a standalone legal lot, decades after, and would suggest that part of the variance process is to find a means to mitigate the harshness of a zoning ordinance. And now we have the slope restrictions as part of that zoning ordinance to allow reasonable development. And the proposed footprint of the house and the structure is reasonable, particularly when you put it in the context of everything surrounding it, every structure surrounding it. I think if you look at them, they all look to be larger. That's just eyeballing it, but they all look to be larger. This is a reduced footprint. It minimizes the disturbance area, and the commitment deals with the slope, the erosion concerns that would come out of construction activity in a reasonable manner that would allow this to be developed and get in, frankly, in the same position our neighbors are on either side, a completed structure with stabilized soils. And frankly, I disagree with Larry's comment about the 18-degree slope. If you follow that 18-degree slope line and take it south, you're going to find that it cuts in as much of the structure to the south as it does this, if not more. And that structure, by all reports, or by lack of reports, I should say, is not harmful to anybody's concerns. And we're asking to get to that same place. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Borgman, you had your hand raised a moment ago.
Yes, I was. Mr. Carmen mentioned what I was going to say. That yes, we did consider reducing the footprint even more, but we thought reducing it even more would not fit in with the neighbors' size houses. And long-term wise, having a house that, square footage wise, being out of place would not be good for the character of the neighborhood.
Did you consider making it a two-story home?
Yes, we have talked to the petitioners about that. At their age, that they are concerned about steps and having to go up and down steps. And that is why they'd like to keep the ranch style house.
Okay, that was a question I had. Thank you. Does any of the board have any more questions for Mr. Borgman, Mr. Carmen, or the petitioner? Is there anyone else here that would like to speak on behalf of this petition?
Yes, Mark here again.
Okay.
If we reduce, first of all, it's my understanding that the footprint of the new design not only have we reduced it a bit, but it's smaller than the houses directly north and directly south. And so I'm just wondering why we cannot be treated in the same footing as the neighbors there. Now, if we had to reduce the footage, we'd try then to compensate. 800 square feet or 600 even is really very small. And so we'd have to try and compensate that by building a second story. I don't know that a second story, a two-story house would fit with the, Todd was speaking to that, would fit with the character of the neighborhood. Now, I don't like to bring this up, but I mean, would we be allowed to have a trailer there? Can anyone address that?
I wouldn't know on that. That's not what the board is here for. We're just here to hear the variance, sir.
Yeah, I see. What I'm thinking is we want to have something that fits in with the neighborhood. And according to what we've tried to do very hard, we don't want to create any land disturbance, anything that we can avoid, and we're going to compensate for that. But something that would fit with the neighborhood, I think that's the key. That's would help also maintain the value of the other properties. Okay. So thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir.
No.
All right. Is there anyone else here that would like to speak on behalf of this petition that hasn't already spoken? Seeing none, is there anyone here that would like to speak against this petition? Seeing none, does one of my board members have a motion ready? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chadwick. Mr. Chadwick?
There you go. Sorry.
Okay.
Technical difficulty.
All right.
This is Mrs. Chadwick.
Mrs. Chadwick, please state your full name.
Sherry Chadwick.
Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
In response to Mr. Corman, I think it's Corman, he said it is zoned RE 2.5. But it does not, that zoning say that that lot has to be at least 2 acres to build upon. And that lot is 1.33 acres. He didn't, I didn't understand if he stated that the lot was both legally created and properly deeded. That was one of the questions at the last BZA meeting about this property, that it wasn't properly deeded. And I understand that the last time that the staff said to move the house further west on the lot, but it doesn't matter how far west you move the house or how small you make the footprint of the house, it will still sit within that 15-degree slope. And even the front yard setback is still in that 15-degree slope. And that slope, you know, Drew said it was just a gradual decline, but it's not. That slope is a steep drop off that you really can't see from those pictures. And even looking at those pictures, the slope is so large that you're looking at the roof line of the neighbor across the street's house. I feel like we only have one shot to protect not only our environment, but the safety of those around us. And we do live south, and we struggle. We have an electric fence left by the previous owners of the house. And we can't get someone to come in and remove the fence because the slope is so great, they're afraid they're going to lose their equipment down that hill. So yeah, we're trying to protect our environment too. And what happens to the displacement of all of this dirt if you do build on that land to the creek below? What happens to the creek that runs through our property? And I read the letters from the petitioners from their neighbors? Because see, they live on the other side of this. It's a holler, or, you know, they live on the other side of this cliff over here. So they don't even live in our neighborhood. They live in Inverness Farm, and we live in Inverness Woods. And they say that building on this lot won't impact it. It won't impact them, but it will impact us. And they're recommending it, but they don't even live over here. So much so that in front of their houses, they have a big sign that says it's a private road and residents and guests only. They don't even want you in their area. And they said that they bought this lot in order to build on it and that they pay taxes on it, but taxes shouldn't even be taken in consideration at the Board of Zoning Appeals. That's a total tax assessor's office situation. And
does the board have any questions for Mrs. Chadwick? No. Thank you, Mrs. Chadwick. Larry, did you have something that you wanted to
I just wanted to clarify, Mrs. Chadwick raised the issue in regard to minimum lot size of the lot. The RE 2.5 zone is a Chapter 833 zone, which means it's part of the old former fringe that was administered by the city of Bloomington. And in the RE 2.5 zone, you can build on a lot less than the minimum lot size as long as you meet the side yard and front yard and rear yard setbacks. So even if the lot is undersized, you're allowed to build on it unless you do not meet the setbacks.
Thank you, Larry, for clarifying that. Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak against the petition? Okay, seeing none. Do any of my fellow board members have a motion, please?
Mary Beth, can I ask one question?
Yes, absolutely.
In the packet, there was this exhibit 12 on the commitment concerning, is this something that's a legal document that can be held accountable for if they sign it? I've never seen something like this in the media.
Yes, so that exhibit was provided by the petitioner's representative, and it is a draft written commitment to protect slopes and to minimize the disturbance as much as possible, I believe. It's in your packet, and if it's signed by the petitioner and recorded as a legal document, it is binding. So it's similar to some of the conditions that staff recommends, in that we request written commitments from petitioners stating certain things that they otherwise would just verbally commit to, but in a written form, it's more binding.
Thank you, Drew.
I just have some questions or concerns that I'd like to raise for my colleagues, and also hear any response that the planning professionals have on these issues. Number one, our slope requirements aren't trivial requirements. They're aimed at preserving our watershed and preserving the community's water supply. And it's done such that so as to avoid the buildup of silt and other things in the waterway. And even though this piece of property has a lot of unbuildable area, I don't think that just because a person owns it, that they have the right to build outside of what is permitted. And especially when we take into consideration other common pool resources like our water supply, erosion, storm management, et cetera. So I know that there are certainly practical difficulties on this lot, but that doesn't mean to me that the building automatically gets approved just because there are also environmental constraints on this lot. So I'd like to, I'm troubling with this, especially with some of the ideas put forth by Mr. Carmen. And it looks like a very difficult plot of land to build on. I'm not sure that we're required to allow building on every lot just because it happens to be owned. I'd like the staff to maybe talk about the reasons behind the environmental constraints and what those are legislated to help protect and why.
Larry, do you want to answer that question?
I'll just be real brief. Since the early 90s, we've had a environmental constraints overlay in the Lake Monroe watershed. The purpose being to assure that there are basically on steep slopes that there would be a minimum amount of land disturbance. And it's really the eco area variances are really variances to allow land disturbance in steep slope areas. More recently, we enacted the 15% buildable area requirement, which is why there are two different variances required here. The 15% buildable area requirement was based upon, again, issues of both erosion, water pollution, those kind of issues, as well as the fact that a 15% slope under state regulation is sort of the maximum slope you can have a sewage on-site sewage disposal system. So that's the history. It was the eco area zones are designed to minimize land disturbance within the Lake Monroe watershed and preserve a vegetated cover to help filter the water as it goes into the drainage system.
Thank you.
Any further questions for staff?
I have a question, Mary Beth.
Go ahead, Vicki.
Regarding the septic system on the pictures, where exactly would that be at on that slope? Could you bring that up, Drew, and show us where it might be?
Yeah, let me see if I can find that for you. So it's more or less the southern half near the road is where the health department has their proposed septic field delineated. Now in the pictures, let me see if I can get a good one here. It looks like it would be farther back in this area. So it's hard to tell in these photographs, probably I would say in this area here or more back in here. I don't know if any of these other ones are going to provide enough reference for me to locate the position of the field, but yeah, our best guidance is on the surveys as well as on the septic permit itself.
So this may be a stupid question, but would the health department give a permit if they thought the slope was too steep?
I do not believe so. So this is an interesting case where there was an much older septic permit that was once approved for this site. So that's why it's stated here as a renewal or modification of a septic permit. The health department does do inspections and they do take into account sloped areas, and they try to propose a location that best fits the area.
Thank you, Drew.
Any other questions for staff or petitioner? Would any of our board members be ready to make a motion?
Well, I'm going to follow the staff's recommendation and in case numbers VAR -21-53A, buildable area 15% slope, I would like to recommend denial. And with regard to VAR -21-53B, eco area 3 slope, recommend denial. And also, if the staff has recommended approval of the front yard setback under VAR -21-53. So I'm going to follow the staff's recommendation on this, and I approve, or I make the motion for denial of VAR 21-53A and B and approval of 21-53C.
I'm going to second that. Okay, I'll second the motion. Larry, you want to call rolls on these separately?
I guess we can do it that way. I will call 3 separate rolls on this. That way we won't have to, maybe that will save time. The first vote will be on variance 21-53A, the variance from the 15% slope standard under chapter 804. A yes vote is a vote to deny. Skip Daly.
Nay.
Mary Beth Smartcheck.
Yes.
Vicky Sorensen.
No.
Margaret Clemens.
Yes.
Bree Garitas.
He left the meeting. He is not here.
Okay, we have a tie vote. Okay, we have a split vote. Okay, let me go ahead with the second variance, which would be variance 21-53B, the eco area slope from chapter 825. Again, a yes vote is vote to deny. Meredith Smartcheck.
Yes.
Vicky Sorensen.
No.
Margaret Clemens.
Yes.
Skip Daly.
Nay.
Okay, again, we have a 2-2 vote, and it requires a majority vote for either denial or approval. Let me move on to variance 53, VAR 21-53C. This is a vote to grant a variance from the front yard setback from chapter 833. A yes vote is a motion to approve the front yard variance. Vicky Sorensen.
Yes.
Margaret Clemens.
Yes.
Skip Daly.
Yay.
Meredith Smartcheck.
Yes.
Okay, the front yard setback is approved by a 3-1 vote. The other 2 variances, having failed to receive a majority of either approval or denial, will be continued to the next BZA meeting.
I think it was 4 in approval of that front yard setback.
Skip, did you say yes or no?
He said yes.
Yes.
Okay, I apologize. Okay, again, it was approved 4-0. The other 2 variances were 2-2, which means it will be carried over to the next agenda.
Sometimes it's hard to tell the yay from the nay, so that's why we say yes instead. That way we are clear. Okay,